Ukraine is taking the fight to Moscow. And it's extremely important because until this time, really, this war has been a theoretical war for the population of Russia, particularly for the population of Moscow. They've felt it in terms of fuel prices, and they've read about the casualties. Or most of the casualties are not Muscovites; they're people from outside town and much further east. So the war hasn't really impacted. So now we're getting the war impacting. So if you remember, last month we had the very interesting development of the parade having to, Putin had to ask Prime Minister Zelensky not to attack the parade. And of course, Zelensky replied that I permit the parade to go ahead, which was pretty humiliating. And then, of course, in a couple of weeks ago, we had the attack on the oil refinery in St. Petersburg in the middle of a multinational conference. So you had this thick black smoke drifting across the city while Putin is trying to tell, potential investors that everything is fine in Russia. And now we have, of course, big explosions around Moscow. Now, these explosions are caused by two things. Most of them are caused by interceptors going up and shooting down the Ukrainian missiles and drones, which make a big bang but don't do much damage. But some missiles have got through, and one of them has got through to some oil storage tanks. So we now have a repeat of the situation in St. Petersburg, where we have thick black smoke drifting across Moscow. So I think, psychologically, I mean, not militarily, not even economically, but psychologically, this is quite a moment. I don't believe for a moment that Putin welcomes the fact that the war has come to Moscow. I don't believe that for a moment, any more than President Trump is pleased that his ratings amongst Republicans are beginning to fall as a result of what has happened in the Straits of Hormuz. But it's a really good question. I mean, we have to wait and see whether this will increase the desire of ordinary Russians to have a victory in Ukraine, or will actually say, why are we doing this in the first place? The development over the last couple of years of particularly Farpoint, which is a Ukrainian missile developer, of developing long-range missiles has been quite extraordinary. So in April alone, 21 missile attacks were launched against oil installations, against the Baltic coast, the Black Sea, and east of the Urals. So we've now got Ukrainian missiles which can routinely do over 1,000 kilometers, and some are under development which can do more than that. So the development of Ukrainian missile systems has been quite remarkable. Russia, of course, has got air defenses, and they've been, reasonably effective. I think the most interesting calculation, which I don't think anyone knows completely, is what effect all these attacks on oil infrastructure is having on the availability of fuel inside Russia. Now, there was a very interesting report, I think it was only last week, that Russian gas stations have hiked the prices of petrol by 19%. That does imply, to me, that there may be a supply shortage. So this is something worth watching, and incidentally, needs to be watched in concert with the various interdictions against the shadow fleet. Obviously, that doesn't affect domestic oil prices, but it does affect the prices for which, the amount of money for which Russia can earn from its oil exports. So that interception in the English Channel last week was very interesting, but I suspect might have other important implications too. It was at least 6 weeks ago that Prime Minister Starmer said in Helsinki that we're now going to take on the shadow fleet, and the implication was far more than just one tanker. And then we waited and we waited and waited and nothing happened. And then, if one were cynical, one would say a few days before the G7 meeting, we do actually take out a tanker, and Royal Marines board a tanker. So at last we've done what we said we would do, albeit in only one case, and the French have done one case, and the Americans have done one. Now, given that there are meant to be 700 of these tankers, this is not really an impressive performance at all. On the question of the English couple off south of the Isle of Wight being fired on by the Russian frigate, I don't believe this has got a lot to do with the taking of the shadow tanker. I mean, yes, Russian Russian ships will be on the alert for any attempts to board them. And I suppose in theory, you might have had one or two people on board the yacht. So they were going to fire a warning shot, which is unusual, but I don't think is the response. I'm afraid to say the response will be considerably more than that. Putin will make sure that we know that there has been a response for that shadow tanker, and it will probably be bigger and more serious than we realise. I think it will be at a time of his choosing, and it just reminds us really of our weak defences. I mean, they always say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. I'm all in favour of removing the shadow tankers, but we all need to be on alert that Russia will definitely try something. It might be in the cyber domain. Goodness knows what domain it might be in. They might arrest some people in Moscow on trumped-up charges, and goodness knows what might happen. But something will happen, and it's nothing as small as happened in the English Channel with that British couple. As for Ukraine, I think it'll be missiles, more missiles. I fear that it'll be directed at more heritage sites. Really, really tragic, I'm afraid, but that is going to happen. There may be ideas about, looking again at the Belarus front and the way north into Kyiv from Belarus. But that one's got problems as well, in that Belarus is not particularly keen for the war to extend there. And actually, Russia is short of forces. So I think the Russian retaliation for Moscow is going to be a big missile retaliation. And, at the moment, there is a window while the Patriot interceptors have been expended and before the new range of missiles, air defense missiles, are available, where Kyiv is relatively vulnerable. Ukraine has got to do what it has got to do to win the war. Now, whatever win the war means really negotiating for peace from the best possible military position. So maybe that's in September, when it's made further advances in the Donbass, so that we don't have a replay of the Trump solution, which was essentially that Ukraine should give up the whole of the Donbass, which was an outrageous suggestion even then. But I don't think will even be relevant by September, because I think the position on the battlefield will be very different. No, I don't think Ukraine should be deterred any more than we should be deterred by what Russia decides to do in retaliation for that shadow fleet boarding. You've got to do what you've got to do, and then you've got to take the consequences. Otherwise, you're into the world of appeasement, and we all know where that leads.